thank you so much for coming tonight. I know some of you have come all the way from Rutland, and some from as far as Burlington. And I know for some of you it's your first vigil since the Vietnam War, and I thank you very much for that. When I think back, I should say first that I'm Braden, and if you're already part of Gun Sense Vermont, I'm the one that's been sending you emails. So, thank you. When I think back to that day last December, it wasn't a specific moment. It was more like this emerging horror. When I realized that the main thing those initial reports had gotten wrong was that it wasn't just 1 or 2 children who weren't going to get tucked into bed that night. It was 20. With the previous mass shootings, I had been sad. But this time, I was angry. I was so angry that the same thing kept happening and nothing was being done to stop it. Because I realized that if it could happen in Newtown, it can happen anywhere. My mom lives in Newtown. I've brought my 3-year-old to the town playground where I'm sure those children played. It's a regular town with regular people. When I pictured Sandy Hook Elementary that day, I didn't picture a crime scene. I pictured a regular elementary school, one that's a lot like ours. On one of the days that followed, my 3-year-old caught me crying. He asked me what was wrong, and I said, some children far away had gotten hurt, and I was sad about that. And he said in his halting 3-year-old speech, they lie down and feel better. Those 20 kids should be blowing bubbles right now. Their parents should still be able to tuck them in at night and kiss them. But those parents don't have giggling children to tuck in. They don't have children who ask for one more goodnight story. When they kiss their children goodnight now, they kiss a picture in a frame, and that's as close as they can get. Richard Chaplinsky is a hunter and a veteran and also a member of Gun Sense Vermont. He spoke at our recent press conference in Montpelier, and his main message was this: we have a responsibility to take action and demand sensible gun laws. And if we don't, we are complicit in future tragedies. December 14th marked the moment many of us started paying closer attention to the issue of gun violence. Soon we realized that the amount of violence we have here in the United States is not shared by other developed countries, that our gun homicide rate is not just double the average of other developed countries or 5 times, but 12 times higher than the average developed country. We realized that for years, the NRA has been blocking any research to figure out anything connected to firearm deaths, and that they had been systematically working to make the laws that are on the books unenforceable. It was suddenly clear that our country has been pushed out of balance and that there needed to be an organized effort to bring it back from the brink. My husband and I brought our 2 children to DC for the March on Washington in January. And there, one of the march organizers said, try to do something every day on this issue. I thought about it half-heartedly and thought, well, that's a good goal, but I don't know what I would actually do each day. But then we drove back home from DC, and we went back via my mom's house in Newtown, and we passed 26 handmade stars on a telephone pole. And then just hours after we got back home to Brattleboro, we got that robocall informing us of the threat that had been made on the schools. We cannot pretend that we are immune here. And if I didn't have a fire lit under me before it was lit then, something had to be done. But at the time, no progress was being made at the State House. A bill had been introduced in the State Senate, but then it had been pulled within a week because there was such vehement response from the state's gun lobby. And in the House, despite the best efforts of Representative Linda Waite Simpson from Essex and Mike Mrawicki from Putney, among others, no bill even made it out of committee. It was clear then that if we wanted to see lawmakers take action, there needed to be an organized statewide coalition of people insisting that they do so. That was in mid-March, and that's when Gun Sense Vermont was created. Gun Sense Vermont is a coalition of Vermonters who support sensible gun laws. We bridge organizations such as the Vermont Public Health Association, Child Safe Vermont, and the Vermont chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, as well as connecting individuals from around the state, all standing together for gun laws that better protect our children, our public spaces, and our communities. We are gun owners and non-gun owners. We are doctors and teachers. We are hunters and veterans. We are civic leaders and religious leaders. We are supporters of the Vermont and U.S. Constitution, and we are united in our call for common sense action that protects the rights of individuals as well as those of our communities. Right now in Vermont, we have some of the weakest gun laws in the nation. We're tied with Arizona. When it comes to protecting our communities from gun violence, I can count the laws on my fingers. In Vermont, a 16-year-old can legally buy and carry a loaded weapon without parental consent. And in Vermont, there is nothing to keep a criminal from hanging out in the parking lot of a gun show or a flea market and buying whatever is for sale. And unfortunately, the weakness of these laws has already taken a toll on our state. We have the highest gun death rate in New England, twice as high as Massachusetts. And the easy accessibility is encouraging a growing guns for drugs trade. But there are plenty of straightforward, common sense measures that can be taken to strengthen Vermont's gun laws so that it's harder for guns to fall into the wrong hands. We can bring state law in line with federal law so that violent felons are not allowed to possess weapons. We can crack down on straw purchases, those who purchase guns for criminals. We can require a background check everywhere a gun is sold. And we can make sure that when a background check is conducted, it takes into account all the critical information. Right now, if someone is found not guilty of a crime by reason of insanity, they can go out the next day and buy a gun from the nearest gun shop. Or they can just have had a domestic violence protective order issued against them. There needs to be better communication. In our conversations with lawmakers, it's clear that there is a lot of tacit support out there. But there was one question that we got again and again. Have you talked to the governor? Because the governor has said he doesn't think we need to change our laws in Vermont. He says there are a lot of responsible gun owners in Vermont. And that's true, there are. But there are also a lot of responsible gun owners in Connecticut, and there are a lot of responsible gun owners in Colorado. The thing is, it just takes one irresponsible person. And right now we have hardly any laws keeping guns from falling into the wrong hands. And Vermonters understand this. We started this organization just 3 months ago, and already we have over 400 members in 125 different Vermont towns. But we need to keep growing. Right now, we need to be signing up every supporter we can find so that when the next legislative session rolls around, we will be just as big and organized as the gun lobby. Though, of course, my secret hope is that we'll be even bigger. Many at the State House have shown that they will not take action unless we insist on it. And so it's our responsibility to do that. Because even though there's plenty of politicians who would like this issue to go away, it's not going away for our children. They are the ones who have to deal with this. Whether it's a third grader who's scared to go to the bathroom because he's figured out if there's an intruder alert, he'll be locked out of a classroom and left to fend for himself. Or whether it's a middle school students who were on the bus last month in Barnett when a 13-year-old pointed a gun at it. How can we look those children in the eye and say there's nothing else we can do? People talk about their freedom when it comes to bearing arms. But there is also a different kind of freedom that needs to be protected. Freedom from fear. Because kids should be free to blow bubbles. And they should be free to blow out the candles on their next birthday cake. That is a freedom we must preserve. I'd like to introduce now Mike Mrawicki, who's the state rep from Putney and who's been an excellent supporter of all of this legislation at the State House.
haven't come forward here and looked at the pictures, I was really moved just walking up here and stopping to see the faces that no longer go home. I want to welcome you all here. I want to welcome you all from out of town. Welcome you to Brattleboro. For those of you who have come further, welcome to Vermont. And to all of you, welcome to the 21st century. One of the things we've been doing in the legislature, and which I think defined the narrative of the last session, was moving Vermont into the 21st century with our laws. We've been upgrading our laws in juvenile justice. We've been upgrading our laws to reflect the 21st century reality in healthcare. We've been upgrading our laws in areas that we haven't looked at. And one of the things that I've been asking people is, in the legislature, isn't it time we looked at all of our public safety laws? Isn't it time we upgraded them and brought them into the 21st century? There's still work to do, and when we reconvene in January, I hope this will be a continuation of our efforts to bring Vermont into the 21st century. Nationally, I think there was a dialogue in the presidential election where, whether it was for healthcare, whether it was for women's rights, the big question was, are we moving forward or do we go backwards? I think the voters of Vermont answered clearly, the voters of the United States answered clearly, that we want to move forward into the 21st century. This is why we're here. We're here tonight, too, to commemorate these children. To remember, as Ann said, those parents that don't have somebody to tuck in at night. We're here today, as Maggie Cassidy has shared, teaching at Brattleboro High School, to understand what it's like for children practicing lockdowns. These children are not thinking about learning when they're practicing lockdowns. They're afraid. When people are afraid, cognitive processes stop. Is this the way it is all across the country? Because it is right here in Brattleboro. It's time. It's time for us to act. It's time for us to move into the 21st century. Not that all laws will prevent all uncivil behavior. You know, the governor's right on a lot of things, and I agree with him. It's not the people who are acting safely that we have to worry about, though. Vermont is a safe state in many ways. But the reality is, we can't wait. We can't wait for Washington. We can't wait for another school shooting. We've had one in Vermont already, up in Essex. And we shouldn't wait. Vermont has been leaders. Vermont has been a leader on abolition and slavery. Vermont has been a leader in healthcare reform, civil rights, marriage equality. Vermont can be a leader here, too. We can't wait for Washington. Well, we have a delegation that I'm proud of in Washington. They're up against some big odds there. One of the things that we've been hearing is we should wait for a 50-state solution to come out of Washington. I don't think that's the way to do it. You're the leaders out there. When the people lead, the leaders will follow. And that's what you can do as we move forward. As Ann said, the organizing that started in March is now spread to 120 towns in Vermont in a few short months. This is a movement that's gaining traction right across Vermont. People understand the difference between hunting, between self-defense, and weapons getting in the hands of people that shouldn't have them. Whether it's because of a transient mental health issue or the reality that a violent felon shouldn't have weapons. You deserve a vote. These children deserve a vote. As the President said in his State of the Union, the children of Newtown deserve a vote. I'm hoping with all of us working together, we can move forward and have that vote next year. Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Bob Williamson, who has been working on this issue for 25 years. He came down from Woodstock today to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Mike, for your eloquence, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. We stand here today to remember those who were killed in Newtown by a senseless act of violence. Yesterday marked the 6-month anniversary of that horrible event, and I've been wrestling with the best way for us to remember those 20 first graders and the 6 brave teachers that sprung to their defense. You see, events like Newtown, Virginia Tech, and Columbine touch me personally, very personally. They stir up a lot of powerful emotions and memories. You see, my daughter's school was victimized 25 years ago by an armed intruder with guns. That was in Winnetka, Illinois, a sleepy little suburb of Chicago. I heard about this tragedy as I was coming home from work on a commuter train. I had a Walkman radio on and I was listening to it as it was happening in real time. I did not have a cell phone, so I could not call home and ask my wife, Joan, if Claire and Kate were okay. I had to sit on that train for 45 minutes. That was pure hell. I would not wish that torture on anyone. When I got to the station, my wife greeted me with the news that our children were okay, but that one of their schoolmates, Nikki Corwin, was dead, and the shooter was still at large in the neighborhood. It was a beautiful, warm spring day, but I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it felt as cold as January when I got off that train. There was a police helicopter flying overhead, and it was as if the blades of the copter were knocking chunks of sky out of thin air, and they were shattering at my feet. It just transformed reality. It was unbelievable. Later that night, when I was at home with Claire and Kate and my wife, I was able to start to piece together the fragment of events that had unfolded. And as I said, Nikki Corwin, 8 years old, was killed. 5 of the other children in the school were in critical condition. We didn't know if one of them was going to make it through the night. She did. A 20-year-old college junior in a neighboring household, Philip Andrew, was wounded trying to disarm the shooter, Lori Dan, who later took her life in the Andrews household. And I made a vow that night, 25 years ago, to do all that I could to prevent future tragedies like that from happening. Things that would make sense. And the path that I found myself on took me to the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence, where for 12 years I chaired in Chicago the annual walk against gun violence. I created a contest for children to raise their voices. We see these young faces. They were too young to have the opportunity to even vote. As 2 children said about 15 years ago, we're kids, we don't have a lot of rights, but don't we at least have the right to grow up? And that really resonated with me, and that's why I started that contest. And I'll tell you, contests and walks are good, But to leverage real positive change, you need some legislative outcomes and good lawmakers like the one back here that you have in Putney. I like to point to one measure that the Illinois Council had a hand in shaping that really made a difference in Illinois. It was the Safe Neighborhoods Law, which made it a Class 4 felony to carry a loaded firearm in a vehicle. And in the first 3 years that was law in Illinois, it lowered drive-by shootings in Chicago by 41%. And that's according to the police superintendent, Matt Rodriguez. So I learned from that, when you write a good law and enforce it, you save lives. Sometimes I wonder if Washington is listening, to all of this. I know they were in New York and in Connecticut and Colorado and Maryland and New Jersey, because they passed some life-saving reforms there in the wake of Newtown. And folks can still buy guns in those states and all across the country. It's a constitutional right that's affirmed by the Supreme Court. But like every right in the Constitution, even the right to keep and bear arms is subject to reasonable regulations. And it always has been, it always will be. And I like to say, what about Vermont? We don't have a gun problem. Actually, we do. We have the highest youth firearm suicide death rate in the Northeast. That's not just New England, that's the entire Northeast, including New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. We also have the highest youth firearm accidental death rate, and it's primarily because of the easy access of guns that are unsecured in Vermont homes. Most responsible gun owners will lock up their guns, but some still don't, and we're paying a huge price for that. There are 27 states that have safe gun storage laws, and the District of Columbia. We could use one in Vermont to protect our children. Florida was the first state that passed one of these laws. They love their guns in Florida just as much as we do here, but they realized they had a problem with kids and guns, and they fixed it with this law. And within the first year, they saw death and injury to children from firearms drop by more than 50%. Again, write a good law, enforce it, you'll save lives. Our governor, Peter Shumlin, says he supports a ban on assault weapons, but a federal law. He goes on, we need a 50-state solution, not state by state. No state is an island. Well, actually, Vermont is an island. We're the only state out of the 50 states that does not prohibit felons from having guns. When you're an armed drug runner from out of state and you're running heroin into Vermont, our local police cannot serve them with a weapons violation because we lack that law. If we want to stop the heroin that's destroying our communities, give our local police the tools they need to crack down on these guys. It's common sense. Common sense showed up big time in February with the Castleton Institute survey, which showed that Vermonters of all stripes, responsible gun owners and responsible citizens alike, favor universal background checks and other reforms. And on town meeting day, 5 different communities in Windsor County, just to the north of here, and 1 in Orange County, passed advisory referendums to encourage our state and federal lawmakers to ban assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition clips, crack down on drug trafficking and straw purchasers, and extend background checks so that everybody gets checked when they're buying a firearm. It makes common sense. 4 months ago, Valentine's Day, I went down to Hartford, Connecticut for the big March for Change that they had down there. And it was right after that huge blizzard that dumped a lot of snow all over Connecticut. There were nearly 6,000 people that turned out for that event to hear the governor, the lieutenant governor, all the state lawmakers speak out for sensible reforms. The 2 speakers that really resonated with me were not elected officials, but 2 private citizens, Colin Goddard and Veronique Posner. Colin Goddard is a survivor of Virginia Tech. He still carries 3 bullets in 1 leg. And Veronique Posner is the mom of little Noah Posner. His picture is down. He was the youngest victim of Adam Lanza on December the 14th. Colin Goddard said he was there on Valentine's Day, not because of something that happened to him 7 years ago at Virginia Tech, but because what happened to him 7 years ago keeps happening again and again and again. And he asked us to think about the extraordinary courage of the 6 brave ladies that sprung up in the defense of their children and stood between a gunman armed with an assault weapon protecting their children. He says, we're not asking our elected officials to show that kind of courage, but we are asking them to stand up to an NRA lobbyist armed with a checkbook. Now, Veronique Posner was just so eloquent. She talked about Noah as only a mother can. She called him her 6-year-old force of nature. Whenever he asked you a question, she said, he'd disarm you with his curiosity and innocence, and in that wonderful way that children have. You know, and he represented everything that we treasure about our children. Anytime we lose a child, our lives are diminished. That force of nature named Noah Posner and the 19 other children were cut down before they had a chance to fully flower. And 6 ladies were killed in a hailstorm of bullets because a disturbed young man was able to get his hands on unsecured guns belonging to his mother. This time it's different. Newtown has forced us all to re-examine how we treat firearms. A line was crossed on December 14th at Sandy Hook. 300 Vermonters turned out on a Saturday morning on the steps of the Capitol building in Montpelier in February to fix this. And Danielle LaFleur Brooks is here today, who organized that event. She's over here. Great lady. And then in mid-March, 200 more packed into the Capitol building in Montpelier with former Governor Madeleine Kunin to encourage our lawmakers to pass sensible reforms. And you all are here today. Sure, gun violence is a daunting challenge. More than a century ago, tuberculosis cast a pall across our nation, but we found a cure for TB. When I was a child, the big fear was polio, but doctors came up with a vaccine and it's gone. The Soviet Union also struck fear into our hearts, but it crumbled just like the Berlin Wall. And for centuries, we dreamed of space travel, and in 1969, we put a man on the moon. Think about that tonight. When you look up in the night sky and you see the moon, we've been there, 242 miles out there in space. We've eradicated disease, dealt with enemies, conquered space. Gun violence is a man-made problem. There is a man-made solution, and we're all part of the solution. We owe it to all these children and their teachers to do better. You know and I know that blind luck will not stop the next nightmare. I'm a retired teacher. The last thing I'd want is a sidearm while I'm separating two children fighting at recess. We need to get smarter about this. It's summertime. In a few short months, our kids will be returning to school. What can we do now to make them safer? Tell the governor and your state reps and state senators we need a law to secure guns away from children in the home. Crack down on drug runners. Run background checks on all gun purchasers. It makes sense, and it will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Now I'd like to introduce Mary Welford, who is one of the co-heads of the Vermont chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Mary Welford. So on December 14th, probably like lots of you, after I got done feeling sort of overwhelmed and went to my computer and started madly Googling things. Like, I think I was probably Googling, gun control and March on Washington or something, thinking must be somebody out there planning something, and I got to be part of this, and was not finding much at first. And then came across some woman out in the Midwest who had started something called 1 Million Moms for Gun Control, and I thought, well, I don't really like the moms thing so much because this is really all of us, not just moms, but she was looking for somebody in every state to start a chapter. So I was like, okay, well, I can do that. It was a Facebook chapter. And so that's sort of how I got started. And then through that, I met Dina Janis, who lives in Dorset. And I'm actually mainly here today channeling her. She wrote some remarks to offer to you this evening, and then she couldn't be here. So I'm going to be reading Dina's remarks. I guess the only remarks of my own are that I've sort of been thinking a lot about how to talk to people about this issue, because there are obviously such incredibly strong feelings on both sides. And I think it's a challenge for me to figure out how to talk to people who are, feel so strongly about their guns, which is something I don't personally understand. But I think it is important for us to learn to talk to each other and to try to really listen to other people's perspectives and try to find some common ground. But in the end, as with all the great struggles of our times, like civil rights and marriage equality, and people will get left behind. There are people who will never come around to a different point of view, and that's fine. But I do think that we need to try to find a way to talk to people and bring along as many people as we can, because it seems like it's just one of the huge issues of our time now, that we have so many guns, and that just 6 months from this horrific incident, I think it's already, people's memories have already sort of dimmed about how horrible that actually was. And so I think it's important that we keep talking to each other, and keep the issue alive, because it is really easy to sort of forget and move on. But it keeps happening. There's shootings, every day. So with that, I will read to you what Dina had to say. Today, we remember Sandy Hook. We remember those children and their brave teachers who spent their last moments in fear and pain. This past week, another mass murder occurred. It went almost unnoticed in the press. I guess we have set a new bar. 26 people have to be killed, I suppose, before the story can make it past a soundbite at the end of the telling of the news cycle for that day. Is this the America we want to be? When Sandy Hook occurred, people rose up. The gun lobby rose up as well. Our Congress caved. They caved, let's face it. They looked out for themselves, they took the easy path, and so we seem to once again have given up the fight. Old new, I guess. Well, today we come together to say, no, this is not old news. For one thing, thousands of people have died since Sandy Hook, and each day brings a new tragedy from senseless, preventable gun violence. But beyond that, we will not forget the children and families of Newtown. We are here to make the statement, both to the families themselves and to the nation, that we will not forget. Sandy Hook was the 9/11 for any parent in America. It was the moment when all of our hearts were collectively broken, and the shame we felt as a nation at the fact that something like this could happen so easily here was universal. Universal shame is important to not forget. The lessons of history are important to keep alive, and that is why we spend today remembering this collective moment of pain and vowing anew to keep fighting forward in creating sensible change around this issue. Simply put, we can and will do better than this. It's summer now. Folks are weary of fighting and working to no avail on this issue. They need time at the barbecue and visiting family and taking hikes or escaping into their gardens for some R&R. This is natural and necessary, but we must keep in mind the following. This fall, a new generation of parents will drop their 5-year-olds off at kindergarten each day, and we need to make sure they're safe. This fall, our representatives will return from time off, and we need to be there to greet them, saying, we have not forgotten, and if you don't act with courage this time around and face down the gun lobbies, we will put you out of office. I weep again as I write this to think of how, for me, the tragedy is something I must remind myself of each day, the act of remembering, the act of honoring those families. But for the parents and loved ones and the community of Sandy Hook, there is no forgetting, no comfortable distance that can come with time, no soundbite or news cycle that can ever take away the moment-to-moment pain and heartbreak of having had their most precious loved ones gunned down at the end of an assault weapon, their bodies splattered, ripped apart, and destroyed forever. Fight the fight, folks. Now is the time, and if not now, when? Thank you, Dina.
Thank you, Mary and Dina. Now I'd like to introduce Susanna Griffin, who is the minister at the Dummerston Congregational Church.
Thank you. I bring some good news of steps along the way, There's a Congregational Church, a United Church of Christ, in almost every town in Vermont. And at our annual meeting on June 6th, the Norwich Church, distressed by the failure of the legislature to act, brought an emergency resolution that was passed almost unanimously, calling for study and advocacy for legislation for sensible gun laws. I only wish the speakers that are here tonight were at our meeting, because this has been very inspiring for me, and I wish we'd all heard it. Thank you. I wanted to quote tonight and adapt for this evening Archibald MacLeish's powerful poem, The Young Dead Soldiers. The young dead children do not speak. Nevertheless, they are heard in still houses. Who has not heard them? They have a silence that speaks for them at night when the clock counts. They say, "We were young. We have died. Remember us." They say, "Our deaths are not ours. They are yours. They will mean what you make them." They say, "Whether our lives and our deaths were for peace and a new hope or for nothing, we cannot say. It is you who will say this." They say, "We leave you our deaths. Give them meaning." We were young, they say. We have died. Remember us.
I'd now like to introduce my mom, Sarah Bedachek, who's going to read the Sandy Hook Promise.
The Sandy Hook Promise was a public statement issued just, I don't remember exactly how long, it felt just days after the massacre. It was issued by a large group of people, family members, parents, loved ones of the people who had died. It's a very disparate group. They differ from each other in their view of how to go forward, but they all felt resolve, and they made a promise. This is the Sandy Hook Promise. This is a promise to truly honor the lives lost by turning our tragedy into a moment of transformation. This is a promise to be open to all possibilities. There is no agenda other than to make our community and our nation a safer, better place. This is a promise to have the conversations on all the issues, conversations where listening is as important as speaking, conversations where even those with the most opposing views can debate in goodwill. This is a promise to turn the conversation into actions. Things must change. This is the time. This is a promise we make to our precious children, because each child, every human life is filled with promise. And though we continue to be filled with unbearable pain, we choose love, belief, hope instead of anger. This is a promise to do everything in our power to be remembered, not as the town filled with grief and victims, but as the place where real change began. Our hearts are broken. Our spirits are not. This is our promise.
Deep
peace of the rolling wave, peace of the rolling wave, peace of the flowing wave, peace of the flowing wave, peace of the shining stars, peace of the shining stars, peace of the quiet, peace of the quiet earth to you.
These are the people we're remembering tonight. Dawn Hawkspring, age 47. Anne-Marie Murphy, age 52. Rachel Davino, age 29. Lauren Rousseau, age 30. Mary Sherlock, age 56. Victoria Soto, age 27. Charlotte Bacon, age 6. Daniel Barden, age 7. Olivia Engel, age 6. Josephine Gay, age 7. Anna Marquez Green, age 6. Dylan Hockley, age 6. Madeline Sue, age 6. Catherine Hubbard, age 6. Chase Kowalski, age 7. Jesse Lewis, age 6. James Mattioli, age 6. Grace McDonald, age 7. Emily Parker, age 6. Jack Pinto, age 6. Noah Posner, age 6. Caroline Previti, age 6. Jessica Ricos, age 6. Avielle Richmond, age 6. Benjamin Wheeler, age 6. Allison Wyatt, age 6. Now we will ring the bell for the 94 children under 12 years old who have died from a gun since then. 94 children.
The young dead students do not speak. With their teachers and the many children shot down at home or on the streets, they say to us, "Our deaths are not ours, they are yours. They will mean what you make them. We were young," they say. "We have died. Remember us."
Thank you so much. And thank you to Becky Graber and Elizabeth Pittman and Lorna and Kate Traeger for singing so beautifully. I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening. With each of us acting on our own, there is only so much we can do to reduce violence in our society. But when we come together as a group, there's so much we can accomplish. If you haven't yet gotten involved with Gun Sense Vermont, I urge you to join our email list. Gun Sense Vermont members don't pay membership dues, but they do donate a little space in their inbox for us. And I promise that I keep the emails to just once or twice every week. Once every week or two. So please, when we're done here, find someone with a clipboard and make sure you're on our list. We have a wide variety of ways that you can do to help support this cause, so that you can pick and choose and find the one that is right for you. For example, as those of you who are already on our email list know, we are getting started with an initiative to encourage conversations about reducing gun violence in faith communities around the state. So if you're connected to a faith community that you think might be interested in getting involved, please let us know. You're also welcome to join us in 1 month at All Souls Church in West Brattleboro for a screening of the film Living for 32, which is about Colin Goddard, the man that Bob Williamson mentioned, who was a survivor of the Virginia Tech shooting, and his choice to devote his life to reducing gun violence since then. You can also join one of our Noise on Weekday groups that contact key lawmakers once a week to remind them of the importance of passing sensible gun laws. I know that from personal experience, that when I was thinking about this by myself, I was just an individual wringing my hands. But when we come together with others, this is when we can make change. There's a flyer about the film screening on the table with the literature, as long as fact sheets, and there's blank copies of our petition asking Governor Shumlin to support sensible gun laws in Vermont, so you can help get other people signed up as well. And we also have these wonderful t-shirts for sale. We don't have candles this evening, because it's nowhere near dark yet. But I feel like each of us is a candle of hope. Yes, this is an uphill battle. It's true that the State House hasn't been willing to take up the issue of strengthening gun laws for decades. But Newtown changed things. Those children changed things. People are coming together in support of this cause in a way that has not been seen in decades. And this is not an issue that requires a lot of money to fix. It just takes a lot of people making their voice heard. And I have hope. You give me hope. And now, as a final piece to this program, the wonderful Becky Graber is going to lead all of us singing This Little Light of Mine. So please join in, and thank you.
You all know this song? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
I'm gonna let it shine.